Okay, dealing with the parabolas as we work with conic sections. A parabola is a set of all points in the plane that are the same distance from a fixed line and a fixed point not on the plane. So a parabola is a set of all points which are the same distance or equidistance from a fixed point, which we'll call the focus, fixed point to a line there, and the fixed point is called the focus of the parabola, and the fixed line is called the directrix. So here is our directrix, our fixed line. So this point on the parabola is going to be equidistance from the focus and the directrix. The distance between the vertex and the focus is called the focal length. Okay, the vertex and the focus, and we have a vertex, which is something that we are used to working with, and that is going to be right here. And the focus, of course, which we've already identified. And we will find that the distance from the vertex to the focus is the same as the distance from the vertex to the directrix. And we can go ahead, and if you look at our two examples, we have a vertical parabola right here. Now this is what we are used to looking at, and the parabolas that we've done up until now, and it might be something that you recognize as y equals x squared, but you'll see here that not all parabolas are going to be a function, and by that we'll not pass the vertical line test because we have the horizontal parabola. Our parabolas can have a different orientation, and when we get to it, this will be something along the lines of x equals y squared. So subtle difference, orientation is different, but we will get some practice with both of these. But now we see that the parabola can be both horizontal and vertical. Okay, so parabolas with the equation y equals ax squared. So we have y equals ax squared, so we should recognize that a vertical parabola. And it says, what is the equation of the parabola with a vertex of 0, 0? So here's a vertex of 0, 0 and a focus of 0, negative 1.5. So 0, negative 1.5 is going to be my focus. And I will tell you that the focus and the vertex are going to be on the axis of symmetry, and they both lie on the y-axis, so this parabola is going to be vertical. Okay, so if we denote or we write the focus as 0c, coordinate 0c, then the directrix is the line y equals negative c. So in this case, our c is, negative 1.5, so then we would take the negative of that, and then that would be 1.5. So our directrix is going to be y equals 1.5. Okay, so the quadratic form y equals ax squared for the vertical parabola has a vertex of 0, 0. Now the coefficient a is equal to 1 over 4c, and that will give us the focus of 0c, and the directrix, which is negative c. So we were able to shift between the algebraic and the geometric presentations of a parabola. So here we should be able to do some substitution. We know that c is equal to negative 1.5, so we have this thing right here. Y is going to be equal to 4 times negative 1.5 x squared, which is going to give us, I do believe that's going to be 1 over 6, negative 1 over 6 x squared. So y equals negative 1 over 6x squared. Okay, and then if I know that y equals negative 1/6 x squared, I can go ahead and plug in some numbers for x and get my numbers of y and get these order pairs and go ahead and plot them. Once I have them plotted, I can go ahead and connect them with a smooth line. Okay, now that I've plotted my points, I can go ahead and connect them with a smooth curving line, and I should have what would be expected, a parabola opening downward, vertical, and this is going to be y equals negative 1/6 x squared. Okay, moving on to the next question. It says, what are the vertex, focus, and directrix of the parabola with equation y equals x squared over 4? And directrix. Let's see here. So y equals a x squared. So then we know that a when y equals 1/4 x squared. So we know that a is going to be equal to 1/4. I'm not sure what that's going to do for us now, but that is something that we do know. Let's see. So, and since this is going to be a vertical parabola, and we know that the vertex is going to be at the origin, and since a is 1/4, I know that a equals 1 over 4c through substitution of our previous formula right here. And let's see here. So if a equals 1 over 4c, and then we know that a also equals 1/4, then if we make these two things equal to each other, let's see here. So we have 1/4 is equal to 1/4 c. I could do some inverse operations here and find out that c is going to be equal to 1. And since the vertex is at the origin, and that we know, since we know c is 1, we pretty much can conclude then that the focus is going to be the point 0, 1. So, gosh, my focus should be point 0, 1. And if that's the case, then we know that the directrix is the line with the equation y equals negative c, or it's going to be y equals negative 1 is going to be my directrix. And we can go ahead and graph those now using some points calculated from the calculator or manually. Okay, so I'm able to plot some points by doing some substitution with my original equation. I plotted in some x values and gotten out some corresponding y values. And as I plot those on the graph, I'm able to see a parabola forming, and connecting this with the 5 points that I have with a smooth line, I see here that this is going to be y equals 1/4 x squared, and that is my parabola with a focus at 0, 1, a directrix of y equals negative 1, and that is able to graph that parabola. And let's go on to the next example. So now we are going to be working with horizontal parabolas, and if it's vertical or horizontal, the directrix is parallel to the y-axis in this case, so that we know it's going to be a horizontal parabola. And we can go ahead and do some calculations here. Okay, so the equation of a parabola with the vertex at the origin and the directrix is going to be at x equals negative 5/2. Well, if my vertex is at the origin, I know then that my directrix is going to be negative 5/2 to, well, 5/2 to the left. So negative 5/2, that's going to be 2.5. So I'm going to have a line here that is going to be x equals negative 5/2. And let's see, what else do we know? Let's see here. X is going to be equal to 1/4 c y squared, and that is also going to be 1/4, and we know that c is now going to be negative 5/2 y squared, so we're going to get 1/-10 y squared. And I do need to correct that is not negative 5/2. That actually should be a positive 5/2, because remember, your directrix is going to be x equals negative c. So that is positive, so we are actually, x is going to be equal to 1/10 y squared, and now we can go ahead and possibly start doing some graphing here. And we know the origin, we know our focus should be at 5/2, and we can plot some points to get a graph. But what is the equation of the vertex? And I think we've got it. X equals 1/10 y squared. Okay, so what are the vertex, focus, and directrix? Goodness, I must have that spelled incorrectly everywhere. The directrix of the parabola with equation x equals negative 4y squared. Okay, well, we know that x is equal to 1/4c y squared, and then we know then that negative 4 is equal to 1/4c, or my a is equal to 1/4c. If we do some inverse operations there, I think we are, goodness, we're going to find out that, do I need to do the inverse operations? Hold on. Okay, so doing the inverse operations, I found out that c is going to be 1/negative 16. So if that's the case, then we know that our focus is going to be 1/negative 16, 0. And then our directrix is going to be, hopefully, x equals 1/16. So we have found the vertex. Have we found the vertex? The vertex should be, hopefully you guys know, 0, 0. And there we go. Okay, so I've done a little bit of substitution here. I said a mirror reflector of a flashlight is 8 centimeters across and 4 centimeters deep. And this is the diagram that I've tried to give you here. So we have this parabola, the mirror reflector, so it's going to be 8 across, so from -4 to +4, it's going to be 4 deep. And let's see, how far from the vertex should the light bulb be positioned? Well, we do some substitution, and we go ahead and substitute in our values. We do know that y equals 1/4c x squared, so we take our points and we go ahead and substitute in x and y with 4, so it's 4 equals 1/4c times 4 squared, which is going to be 4 equals 16/4c. You can do some inverse operations however you want to solve for c, and we know that c is going to be equal to 1. Well, if c is equal to 1, then we know that that focal length, that distance that we're looking for, is going to be 1 centimeter, and that's what that is standing for when we find out that c is equal to 1. Okay, as we look in analyzing a parabola, we are going to learn that, or we're going to recognize that y, when we're dealing with a vertical parabola, here is our transformation formula equation, and when we're dealing with horizontal, this is going to be our transformation equation. And we know that in the past and still moving forward that H is going to stand for horizontal transformations, and K is going to stand for vertical transformations. And let's see, what else do we need to know? And so let's see here. Let's start with what are the vertex, focus, and directrix of the parabola with equation y equals x squared plus 8x plus 18. And goodness, I think we need to do some completing the square here, but let's start off with, because we want to get it to vertex form, so I know that y is going to be equal to x squared plus 8x, and getting it in vertex mode, I know I'm going to have to do completing the square. And if I complete the square, I take half of b and square it, and I know that b here is going to be 8, half of that is going to be 4. 4 squared is going to be plus 16. Now, I can't just add 16 to this equation. I need to make sure that I'm adding the value of 0. So if I add 16, I also need to subtract 16. Now I can find out that y is going to be equal to x squared plus 8x plus 16, and then of course plus 2. Go ahead and write this in vertex form. I should hopefully at this time be able to see that I can factor this into x plus 4 plus 2. So we're looking at an equation, and let's see, what else do I need to know now, or what am I trying to break this down for? Okay, since I'm in vertex mode, I should be able to look at this and say that this is x minus x4 squared plus 2, and I know that my h and k is going to be my vertex, which my vertex then is going to be, h is going to be -4 and k is going to be 2. So I have my vertex, and my focus is going to also be along the y-axis, so then I know that my focus is going to have the same x value. So my focus, we are going to be looking at from my vertex. How can we figure out how far it is from my vertex? Okay, so my focus is going to be h comma k plus c. And we know that h is going to be -4, and then k we determined is 2, and c is going to be 0.25, or if I should work that out, we know, what do we know, that in this standard equation here, that a is equal to 1, and we know that a is also equal to 1 over 4c. Yeah, therefore, c is going to be equal to 0.25, or 1/4. And just to make this a little bit more legible, we then know that k plus c is going to be 2 plus 1/4, or 2.25. And let's see, what more do we need to find out? We have our focus, we have our vertex, and then the directrix. Well, the directrix is also going to be equidistance from the vertex to the directrix, and let's see, what do you suppose that's going to be? Okay, so the directrix is going to be y equals k minus c, and we know that k is 2, c was 0.25, so y equals 1 3/4 is going to be the line for your directrix. And then finally, we're going to go ahead and write an equation of a parabola, and it's going to have the vertex of 1, 4 and a focus of 1, 6. And I'm going to begin by just going ahead and I'm going to graph those 2 points and go from there. So that's going to be the first thing I'm going to do. And I can look here and I can say, okay, if my vertex is at 1, 4 and my focus is at 1, 6, then I know that this length is 2. So then I know that my directrix is going to be at y equals 2. And let's see, I know that it's probably going to, since that's my directrix, it's going to open upward. And let's see what else I can do. Okay, so we know that the vertex is equal to hk. We know that h is equal to 1 of the vertex and k is equal to 4. So plugging that into our vertex formula, instead of h we will have 1, and instead of k we will have a 4. And so y is going to be equal to x minus 1 plus 4. And let's see, what else do we need to know? We do need to find out what the value here is of A. And we know that A is going to be equal to 1/4 of C. And let's go from here. And if you recall right here, we determined that the distance from the vertex to the focus was 2. So therefore, C is equal to 2 because that is the distance. So I know that A is going to be equal to 1/4 times 2, which is going to be 1/8. And I can go ahead and take this amount, plug it in right here, and I know then that the vertex form of my equation is going to be y equals 1/8 times x minus 1 squared plus 4. And there you go, there's the equation of the parabola.